Yo, ever wished you lived in the top crust of society? Because while we plebeians are rationing out our expenses for the month, the 1% of the world are living lavishly, doing whatever they please, and don't have to face any consequences. Most of the time. Anyway, there have been a lucky few who have actually been able to claw their way out of the peasant class, and no one has had a more explosive and mysterious uprising into power as Rasputin. So Rasputin was born as a peasant in buttfuck nowhere Russia. Not much is known about Rasputin's youth, but the small amount of records we do have on him show him to be a bit of a hooligan. He was also illiterate on account of being a disgusting peasant. Anyway, as Rasputin started to get older, he began traveling around Russia, which is when he met a peasant girl named Praskovia Dobrovin, and they both fell in love and had kids. So Rasputin was settled down until he had a holy vision from the Virgin Mary, telling him he needed to go on a religious pilgrimage. That or he was on the run for stealing horses from his village. Whatever it is, this first pilgrimage took him to St. Nicholas's monastery, where he was apparently greatly humbled by the monks there. But later, and this is according to Wikipedia, so take it with a grain of salt, Rasputin said the monks were actually homosexual and were trying to get Rasputin to do gay things with them. Want to play Soggy Communion Cracker? Anyway, despite the gay monks being a huge turnoff for Rasputin, he did change a lot from his time in the cathedral, and by the time he got back to his family and peasant wife, he had become a vegetarian and started to pray a lot more. Basically, Rasputin finally became a family man, albeit a crazed, borderline schizophrenic one. But then... Rasputin! Rasputin! What did I tell you about leaving the toilet seat up? I told you not to do this, Rasputin, and why is the trash not taken out? Oh my god, I'm having another vision from the Virgin Mary. She's telling me to start a sex cult. I mean, find God. See you in 5 years. And with that, Rasputin traveled to St. Petersburg, which at the time was the capital of Russia. It's in St. Petersburg where Rasputin started to become really popular in saloons for being an unwashed peasant who had mythical healing powers, and raved about being the second coming of Jesus Christ. It's in these same saloons where he started to commingle with a bunch of high-ranking officials in the government, so he started to become well known in the Russian higher-up circles. Eventually, this got him invited to meet the Tsar of Russia, Nicholas II. Now, Nicholas and his wife Alexandra had a son named Alexis, who had a chronic illness that had no treatment and was in constant pain because of it. And both Nicholas and Alexandra were convinced that Rasputin would be able to heal their son, which I don't know how the fuck you convince one of the strongest men in the world at the time that you're some godly figure that can do this, but whatever Rasputin did, it worked. Rasputin was able to, on multiple occasions, alleviate his illness, and this caused Alexandra to get very, very, very attached to Rasputin. That's right, the goat-herding, smelly peasant that never showered and didn't know how to use a spoon or fork was raw-dogging the Queen of Russia right under the king's nose. So Rasputin started to show up frequently to help alleviate Alexis's pain, and then swiftly smashed Alexis's mother, and was generally just having the time of his life. But eventually, Rasputin had to go back to his stinky, boring peasant life, because everyone in the Russian higher-ups started to get fed up of him. And it's during this time when Rasputin was with his family at home, when Alexis once again was in life-threatening condition after he tried to ride a horse, which I don't know why they let him ride a horse. Like, he can barely exist without having issues. But they called up Rasputin again, and Rasputin told Queen Alexandra to not let any of the doctors give him any medicine. And the queen actually listened to Rasputin, and to everyone's surprise, the next day Alexis was completely fine. Now at this point, you might be thinking, damn, did Rasputin actually have some mythological powers to him? Well, probably not. For one, we know the medicines the doctors were giving to Alexis actually exacerbated his issues, which is why Rasputin telling them to not give him any more medicine actually helped him. The rest of Rasputin's magical healing powers probably had to do with the fact Rasputin was putting Alexis into hypnosis, because he just knew how to hypnotize people. I don't know where the fuck he picked that skill up from. The Russian royals were none the wiser to any of this though, and a lot of them started to get really, really, really attached to Rasputin. That's right, just smashing the Queen of Russia was not enough, because he ended up seducing 4 other duchesses of Russia. He also apparently had an apartment in St. Petersburg with a harem of women, which really was more of a cult. They all were convinced he was the second coming of Christ, and they all started coming for Christ. So you might now be realizing this whole thing is absurd, and so did the general Russian public. So there was a ton of public upheaval at this time, and magazines and political cartoons would literally make Nicholas II a cuck in the corner watching his wife with Rasputin. It's around this time World War II was starting, and Tsar Nicholas, seeking glory, decided to fight in the front lines, which, side note, did not go well for Russia or the Tsar, but anyway, Russia being in the war meant the Tsar was temporarily out of town. So Rasputin kinda just waltzed back in, mainly because the queen was getting horny, and now he was basically acting as the de facto ruler of the entire country. The only issue with this is Rasputin really only knew how to start cults, and No, that's pretty much it. So when it came to politics, he did not have the slightest clue what he was actually doing. He did appoint some people to help him, but the people he appointed were also unwashed goat herders, so the entire country was going to shit at this point. The Russian nobles were done with him. So one day, the Grand Duke and Prince of Russia invited Rasputin over to a hotel for a chat. They gave Rasputin cake and wine which was laced with cyanide. But despite eating all this poisoned food, he was completely fine, and even asked for 3 more glasses of poisoned wine, only to drink all that down and still be fine. So at this point, the Grand Duke was like, what the fuck? And just pulled out a gun and shot Rasputin, because obviously he needed to take the nuclear option here. And with the pull of that trigger, the greatest con artist, and possibly the second coming of Christ, except he definitely was not the second coming of Christ, met his fate. The 2 men wrapped up Rasputin's corpse and drove him to the side of a bridge to dump him into a river. When out of nowhere, Rasputin comes back to life and starts attacking the dude who shot him. And most surprisingly of all, he was actually winning the fight. After being shot in the chest, just as he was about to overpower the guy he was fighting, the other man shot him again and finally slayed Rasputin. And with that, they dropped him into the river. But then he swam back and no-scoped the 2 guys. I'm kidding. That really was the end of Rasputin. Overall, his legacy is something that has persisted nearly 80 years after his death. And it's like mostly because of this song. But I mean, it's still pretty impressive. So I hope you enjoyed. If you did, consider liking and subscribing. Also catch my live streams. I'm going to be doing them on this channel every single week. And that's about it, man. I'll see you later. Goodbye.